Welcome to TrineDay's The Journey, conversations with publisher Chris Milligan. I am Bruce Taurus. With us is Brook Urick, author of Wink, Wink, Nudge, Nudge, Sexual Exploits and Secrets from Inside a Sugar Daddy Website, where she reveals the horrors of sex trafficking, fraud, and predatory behavior at the notorious Sugar Daddy website Seeking Arrangement, where she worked on staff for years while trying her own luck as a sugar baby. She says, "We can't allow young women to get involved, sometimes unknowingly, in a life of sex work and abuse as a result of this website." Brooke's journey continues as a writer and content creator. You can learn more at her site, brookurick.com. And now, Chris Milligan.
Thank you, Bruce, very much, and thank you, Brooke, for coming on. Lord have mercy, I just had my 75th birthday, and I've seen a few things happen here on this planet. When the internet came along, I was very hopeful for positive change, and we've seen a lot of positive change, you know, and when you approached me about this book, I really wasn't aware of the situation, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that aren't aware of the situation. One of the things that really stuck to me with your book is the revelation about how the 18th birthday for ladies can be a terrible thing, okay, rather than just a beautiful, celebration, because when they turn 18, they become targets for, excuse my language, dirty old men. And your courage in exposing this is over the charts, okay? And I applaud you, Brooke, very much for, standing up and telling us about this situation, okay? Because, we hear little bits and pieces and we see things, I mean, there's been the Me Too movement and stuff like that. But really, the awareness of what these quote unquote sites are doing really isn't out there. And so, again, I applaud you for doing this. And, this podcast is called The Journey. So, how did you get to write this book, Wink, Wink, Nudge, Nudge?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to talk to you guys. I'm excited. I I actually got the idea to write the book when I was reached out to by the New York Times in 2021. And I got laid off from the company in 2009, like the very beginning of 2019, like January 2nd, basically. And I kind of thought it was the beginning of the end because there's that legislation that passed in 2018, the FOSTA SESTA, which is, the amendment to Section 230 that explicitly makes these types of websites criminal. So any website that's assisting, facilitating, or supporting sex work or sex trafficking is actually criminally liable instead of being, protected by Section 230 like it was for a long time. So I kind of thought it was the beginning of the end and that the website would be shut down. And then, 2 years later, I got a call from the New York Times and she was like, "Yeah, I would love to talk to you." And I was like, I think this story's coming. I think it's time I had time to unpack it myself. And I thought it was time to write. So I did. I really wanted to get ahead of the story because I thought there was going to be a New York Times piece. ABC 2020 also reached out to me. So I kind of thought that those stories were going to be transpiring. And I thought it would be smart to kind of get ahead of it. And then when those stories did come out, I would have a book proposal or something to pitch to agents or publishers or whoever. So I did that. I wrote a really badass book proposal. You received it. And I started pitching it to different people. And over a couple years, I realized that not only were neither the New York Times story nor the ABC 2020 story coming out, despite them talking to me for hours and hours. And 2020 flew me out to New York and had probably a $30,000 day of production buzzing around me for 7 hours to tell my story. So I was so confident that my story was in the right hands, these companies with resources who could really make the news and do something about this. And when it became clear that those stories weren't coming out, my tune changed. I think I began to understand. I mean, I guess I had suspicions of like corporate oligarchies and things like that that control the mainstream media, but I hadn't really experienced it for myself. And that whole experience definitely changed the way that I wanted to write the book. And I got a lot of interest from all of the main like big agencies. They wanted to see the book proposal, but no one would take me on as a client. Like no one was interested in it. Even like the publishers I reached out to, no one was interested. And so I began to become more interested in independent journalism, independent media, and came across Whitney Webb. And she one day was talking about you, Kris. And she said, yeah, he publishes books that, other people are scared to publish. And I was like, I need to talk to that guy. Like that guy is going to be my publisher because I'm like, what's going on here? Like, this is a fucking story, like, why is nobody taking this on? So yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for you, Kris, for taking a chance on me because I know it was a chance for sure.
Well, again, that the story that you just related is one that I've heard over and over and over again, and that's why I started TrineDay 20 some years ago, and uh, yeah, they want to just kind of ignore stuff like, well, it doesn't exist, I mean, and it literally, uh, you know. I don't know, blow your mind is correct, or befuddle your mind might be more correct, because well, my daddy was a spook, and he told me some things about a subject I called CIA drugs, and I finally got an understanding of what he was talking about and wrote a book and thought, well, this is going to change the world, but it I got on Fox News one time, and um, I brought up the producer said I'd be on for about 10 minutes, and I brought up the word drugs, that these guys were involved in drug trafficking, and soon it was, well, we've got to go, and I was soon off there. So obviously there is a reticence for the mainstream to carry some stories, and it's interesting, I find, you talk to a reporter, and, at the Times for many years, they flew you out to ABC. So obviously there were some people in that organization that saw the story and said, hey, we want to do something. And obviously somewhere up above, the word came that, oh, we aren't going to talk about this. Okay. And so what was it, the Fosta Sesta thing that you were talking about? Now, uh, there was a site called Backpages, and I believe that site was taken down because of that. Now, what's the difference between Backpages and the place that you seeking arrangements that you worked for?
Backpage did get shut down as a result, actually, of that legislation. So that was the end result, was that Backpage was shut down and FOSTA SESTA was enacted. So basically, Backpage and Seeking were operating in this gray area. And when they brought these legislations up, or these bills up, and they eventually passed, that both should have been shut down. So the main difference between Backpage and Seeking, in my opinion, is Backpage was actually safer because Backpage wasn't hiding what it was. It was Craigslist for sex workers. Like it's a classifieds for, it was very blatant. And the first time I saw Backpage, my older cousin had just turned 18, and my uncle sent me an ad of her on Backpage. And I was like, what is this website? I think I was like 15 or 16. So that was my first introduction to it, was my family member was on it. And I was just so stunned that this website existed. But what they did differently is they had reviews. So it was actually safer for sex workers because the Johns, colloquially, they're called hobbyists. And then I know, right? And then the sex workers are called providers. That's like what they have like on there. So the Johns would get reviews like by the sex workers, right? If he's a good guy, if he pays, whatever. And most sex workers on the site would only take men who had reviews. And then as Backpage, there was a lot of whispers in the community about Backpage being shut down long before it was. So like people like my cousin and others were kind of getting off that site, but most sex workers like that know what the hell they're doing require references so they know they're safe. And that's what Backpage provided, was like online references basically for providers and hobbyists or whatever. So when Backpage was shut down, or if somebody didn't have good reviews on Backpage, then they would go to Seeking, because Seeking is entirely anonymous with no reviews. So when Backpage was shut down, all of those people came over to Seeking, and there was a huge influx in issues with the site. I mean, they couldn't keep up with how it was scaling. There's just all kinds of shady stuff that they did, like outsourcing their moderation to like the Philippines and like all kinds of stuff that's just very shady to keep up with demand.
So I mean, this website makes oodles of money, right? You know, and I mean, it just drives it home again to me about how much has changed. I mean, when I was a kid, the biggest thing was, somebody's father took Playboy, okay, and you could go look at those Playboys, and I remember the first time I went to San Francisco with a bunch of paper boys, and we went out walking at night, and I was getting proposition, and it took me probably 4 or 5 of those to even figure out what they why these ladies were talking to. I didn't understand it, and just how much the world has changed, okay, and about quote unquote sex work. I mean, that wasn't even a term when I was a kid, and to get down to what I talked about at the beginning, I mean, basically for $50 a month, these people have access to these girls that turn 18 and think, well, gosh, I'm going to go find me a sugar daddy and I'm going to live the high life, and it just tell me some stories about the damage that is done to these 18-year-old girls.
It's so sad to think that, well, when you say sex work these days, it doesn't just mean like exchanging like sex for money, it's sexual services as well. So it's porn actors, but also as of late, OnlyFans, which is like a pseudo dating kind of website where it's like almost a parasocial relationship where people think they're engaging with like a model or a porn star, but really they're not. They're engaging with like people, like chat people who like chat with them. It's very strange. But OnlyFans, a lot of young girls, they have like countdowns until their 18th birthday until they can make an OnlyFans. And actually the number one most profitable girl was like she was on Dr. Phil, the Cash Me Outside girl. I don't know, it's like a very memeable thing. She was like a rapper, and she was like a young 13-year-old on Dr. Phil who was like a bad girl, she was like telling her parents to F off and stuff. And she got a rap career and then eventually got OnlyFans. And she actually made more money than anyone else on her 18th birthday. And I mean, that's the sad part, is that you're most profitable as a sex worker before you're 18 and on your 18th birthday. And I mean, I actually didn't start on Seeking until I was 21. So I didn't start when I was 18, but I can see how it's really like warping girls' minds to think that money should come easy to me because I have this body. And when you're young, and that's what I tried to convey in the book, is how much your psyche changes as you get older. And when you're young girl, you don't realize what's going on exactly. And for me, like, I didn't have a close emotional relationship with my dad when I was young. So I sought out attention from older men. And it took me writing this book to actually really unpack that. Because me and my dad have a great relationship now. Like, I love him, but like when I was young, like we were not close, you know? So I think a lot of girls feel that way, daddy issues, right? And so they turn to older men and they think that they're the ones who are in control and they think they're choosing it. But in reality, these older men are predators and they're manipulating them, and they know that they can lie to these girls and tell them exactly what they want to hear in order to get sex and whatever else they want, easily, of course, because now all the girls are hopped up on birth control and sexual revolutions and believing that they can have casual sex. But in reality, like, women are not biologically capable of having casual sex. When we have sex, we release oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone, because we need to be attached to that man because we could be pregnant. So our body tricks us into believing that we want to be with that man, no matter who he is. And no one taught me that growing up, right? I was like conditioned by these like slutty characters on like early 2000s television who got all the attention, who were glorified, right? And so I thought, like, oh, if I dress skimpy, if I do this, like, I'll get attention, I'll get money, I'll get whatever. And while that might be true, it is very damaging as you get older. So it's really hard to kind of explain that paradox to someone who's young. And that's why I wrote the book, because I want someone to see themselves in me and understand how your perspective will change in the future and maybe help you from making some of those bad decisions in the present. So hopefully that works.
Brooke, very, very wise words, and I hope that, lots of people hear them. And, uh, I'm sure your parents are quite proud of what you're doing here, And Bruce, you have any comments or questions here for Brooke?
Yeah, off the top of my head, did Backpages get shut down subsequent to the 2018 law?
Yes. So the founder of Backpage was arrested in 2017 in conjunction with these alleged crimes. And it took about 6 months for the legislation to be enacted. And ultimately, the site was shut down. And he actually ended up committing suicide in prison. Just like, later on Epstein would, and I don't know who else might commit suicide in prison. But honestly, it's very, in my opinion, it's very divine timing that all of these traffickers like Diddy and the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch are all going down for sex trafficking right now. And it's very interesting to me that the enterprises that they were running were based on fame. And they needed that to perpetuate their trafficking enterprise. And that was years ago, right? And it's coming to light now. And what I think is so interesting is that you don't need fame or money or anything anymore to run a sex trafficking operation, because you have seeking arrangement for $99 a month, a steal if you ask them.
Oh,
Did
it's
and did
gone
that?
up from $50. Excuse me.
Well,
Oh yeah, it's whatever. It's a
yes.
deal to them, whatever
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
The Backpage case seems to have been related or inspired the legislation.
As a result, yeah, it was a
Yeah,
direct so there it's called the Freedom of Human Sex Trafficking Act, and then SESTA is
yeah,
like sex. It was basically two bills that were kind of going on synonymously, and then they just decided to combine them because they're kind of the same.
right,
Um, and that legislation was the result of Backpage being shut down. So it's like because of the
right,
legislation, Backpage was no longer legal.
yeah,
Or basically the website is criminally responsible,
right,
and can be criminally charged for their offenses, which, seeking can also be criminally charged for their offenses, but they've never been criminally charged. They just
yeah.
settle civil suits day and night, basically.
And in the advertisements that have been prepared by we at TrineDay, and I assume, collaboration with you, very obviously says, hey, the DOJ needs to investigate this site called Seeking, which used to be Seeking Arrangement, right? And have you had a lawyer assure you can't be sued for these claims? Because the last thing they're going to want to do is call your bluff, because they're not going to want to go to court to defend themselves against whatever this book is accusing, right?
Yes, I do have a lawyer. It's interesting because like I did sign an NDA, so he could sue me for breach of contract or for defamation. I mean, that's definitely a possibility, but it would call more attention to his crimes than I think he wants. And I think that's why he hasn't yet, or maybe he's not going to. I don't know. But I do know that there is a nonprofit called the National Center on Sexual Exploitation that I got connected with because I found their website where they have like one of those prefab forms that's like write the DOJ and tell them to investigate seeking, kind of like write your senator kind of thing. But their website was like using some rhetoric that like I would use, like pseudo dating site. And they basically outlined what exactly was going on. And I was like, wow. I was like, they know, like they
Mm-hmm.
get it. So I reached out to them and I've been helping them build their case. To bring this case to the DOJ. It's been actually, interestingly enough, their webpage went up in mid 2021. This encouraged the DOJ to investigate seeking webpage with all of their like blog content about what's really going on. And right around that time, my former boss officially stepped down as the CEO of the company and ended up putting his new little 21-year-old wife as the CEO of the company. So I wonder if she knows that she is the head of a sex trafficking operation. It's very
Wow.
curious. But it's very interesting that nothing has happened yet to them. And it begs the question, like, who is on this website? Like, I know a certain
Yeah.
Republican congressman from Florida might have been on the website, but I wonder, like, who are they in bed with, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and like there's so many cases in the media that prove exactly what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the website is still around. And it baffles me. Like I
Yeah.
don't understand why that is the case.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'm really hoping to find out, you know.
You're much on your website, and I haven't looked at it all. Brooke is actually really compelling and really playful. And meeting you here, so is your demeanor. I feel like you're very well read and very well educated. Maybe you're even a lawyer. If not, are you on such a path? Tell me about these things.
No, I'm not a lawyer, but I have become very interested in legal proceedings and in the law in general. Because it's kind of like a magic spell, right? You write this magic spell and then you get it enacted and then it creates reality. And what I think is so interesting about legislation is everyone is so interested in like immediate gratification, right? Everyone wants it immediately. But that's exactly the opposite of how legislation is. It's incremental. It's one little thing, and nothing gets passed in the House or the Senate. It's just a little teeny tiny movement because nobody wants to ruffle any feathers. And I think that has kind of of been lost on a lot of people because they think like, oh, well, it's illegal now, so like it should be shut down. I'm like, well, that's really not how legislation works. But yeah, I mean, I've and oh, and to go back to your point about, you know, whether or not like they could sue me or whatever, it's like, yes, of course they could. But we would end up going to discovery eventually if it went to
Yeah.
trial.
Yeah.
And I know where the data hides and I know exactly what's going on. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not scared of him, but I hope he's scared of me.
What are you doing in terms of the content? What do you want to create in the next 3 to 5 years, even as a career path? Because the world needs whistleblowers like you, especially such articulate and calm and compelling and appealing. Do you have a podcast?
I am starting a podcast. I have a couple episodes done. I was traveling for a bit recently, so I haven't gotten a ton of stuff uploaded. But yeah, so my former coworker Alexis, we're doing a podcast together, and then I have a lot of just like content. Like, I mean, there's so much that didn't make it into the book. I cut
Yeah.
out almost half of it, so there's a lot of other stories I want to tell. I want to do like a Substack platform, which is like a subscription based writing platform.
That's a great
Um,
platform.
yeah, it's fantastic. So I'm doing that. I'm starting the podcast, YouTube show. I have my Instagram account, which is like a chronological visual companion to the book, which has like long form captions that kind of tell the story because I want to make this available to everyone, or I mean, people who are on Instagram for free. Like, I don't want people to have to buy the book or pay necessarily to get, I mean, there's teasers, you know, obviously I want people to buy the book, but I want people to know what happens on these websites more so than I want to like sell copies of the book. Oh, and then another one of my like short-term goals is I really want to get this book into women's studies courses, like in colleges. I mean, I think that would be like great, like perpetual revenue for the book. Like if they have to buy it, you know, that'd be great. But I also want them to have to read it. Like I want them to know like what's going on, even if
Yeah.
it's sex work or monetizing sexuality doesn't call to them. I think they should know about these mechanisms because it's not just monetizing sexuality. It's media manipulation. It's, you know, gaslighting, you know, showing you what it is and then telling you not to believe your eyes. Like it's asinine what the internet and the anonymity of the internet has done to our society. It has rotted our culture to the core. And I think
Yeah.
people are so conditioned to not think for themselves anymore. People are being programmed by technology and they're not understanding that, you know, if a technology is free to you, then you are the product, not the consumer. And people need to understand that their data is valuable, and especially their bio data. Oh my gosh, people like sending their data to 23andMe, like that's crazy to me. Like people just don't
It
think about how they're being controlled and manipulated, and that's something that I really want to bring light to.
it opens the door to worlds of valuable wisdom and perspective in terms of self-esteem, in terms of so much other behavior on the internet, in terms of challenging young women and girls to know thyself. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What do I really want in life? What's my self-worth? And it challenges one to deal with all those things. You're on the other side of that, but you should be encouraged to be a whistleblower and model the careers of Whitney Webb and these other amazing podcasters. And if you told yourself, you know, for the next 5, 10 years, that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to look for other stories to kind of expose, I think you would have tremendous success. I think, Kris, I've heard you say in the past that NDAs cannot cover illegal activity, right? So to that extent, Brooke's got no fear about that, right?
Well, you know, um, lawyers get paid by the hour, you know, so they always like to make work. And Brooke, what advice do you give to young girls and women today growing up in this atmosphere?
Don't chase money. It's very confusing when you're young and you don't have enough money to even have your basic needs provided for. Especially like me, I paid for my own college. I was like out on my own. And when I realized how expensive life is and I didn't have anything, I found that I could get money very easily from men. And it made me enamored with money and enamored with men who have money. And what I've learned through lots of trial and error is that having lots of money does not make you a good person. And a fancy car doesn't mean anything when you're a piece of shit. So I wish I could. It's easy to say because like now I'm turning 33, like I do like have my basic needs met. So it's easy to say that when you like have enough money. But I think just not just realizing that happiness does not come monetarily. It doesn't come from material possessions. Like true happiness, like in your brain, actually comes from like helping others and like serving your community and connecting with people. Like that's what really will make your brain happy. And people seem to forget that. They think that doing for themselves and chasing a dollar and getting rich and all of this will make them happy, but it doesn't. It makes them empty. So I mean, I wish I could explain that to people, but I know that's a really difficult concept to understand when you're struggling.
Right. Well, the world continues to change, continues to grow, continues to look at itself, continues to make mistakes. Okay. But with people like you and the book you produced and the courage that you are showing, okay, because there's a lot of people who come across things and they just don't talk about it. They don't, they don't they don't blow the whistle. Okay. And the world and young girls and ladies are very, very lucky to have you in the world and to do what you're doing. Okay. I can't say enough. I mean, it just, again, what these websites are doing and how, they are empowering, again, dirty old men for $99 a month. Okay. Um, it's, I don't know. I don't think disgusting is strong enough word, but it just, I'm so happy that you had the courage and you ended up, you tried a bunch of people and you found us and we got the book out. Okay. Because books are very, very important things. I mean, they just kind of sit there until, somebody picks it up and reads it and says, "Oh my goodness," you know? And so that's what I'm hoping that we get out of this, a whole bunch of, "Oh my goodness." Okay. So any you know, final words, last thoughts here before we go?
Always. We produced this book. It's not just me. Like, I would never have been able to do it without you. And honestly, without Camille Cole, my fantastic, wonderful editor who you set me up with, who has become a great friend of mine. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect person to help pull this story out of me. If I didn't have her, it would have been such a different story because I don't know how to write a book. I never did. I just have a story. So I can't thank you enough for that because it's been very rewarding to me to hear people's reactions to the book, and they've been visceral. People are very moved by it, and every time I read it, I'm on the edge of my seat too. And I wrote it, I lived it. So I think what I did is create a very gripping tale of exactly what happens. And what I didn't expect was like people feeling bad for me. They're like, oh, you've been through so much. Like, I feel bad for you. I'm like, no, like I had it the best it could possibly go. What you should feel bad for is the girls who are being stalked and trafficked and raped and frauded. Like, I didn't have that stuff happen to me. Well, not too much, but that's what I want to do, is I want to empower people to share their own stories, because the culture of shame and secrecy around this lifestyle, it keeps the predators able to do what they're doing. It keeps them perpetuating this awful business that they're doing, because the young girls are too scared to come forward. And that's what scares me the most, is there are so many more victims than there are abusers. And if the victims were to rise up, I think it would definitely change things. So that's what I hope to do.
Well, thank you again very much. God have mercy, and onwards to a better future for our children.
Yes, thank you so much for chatting with me. It's been lovely.
Thank you.